also a chartered accountant. And last month, he has been awarded the best fund manager in the mid-cap category by ET Wealth and Morningstar. And his name also featured as the best fund manager in Outlook Business in 2020. So welcome, Atul, on our platform. Before inviting you to speak, I would like to set the ball rolling by asking you a very broad question. The Indian market saw very sharp V-shaped recovery since March 23rd. Looking for normalization in FY21, as well as the getting a push led by the global surplus liquidity. There are so many factors which are likely to impact the market, be it US election, which is coming on, which is happening on 3rd November, or Trump testing positive, or second wave or third wave of COVID-19. Even we hear talk about job losses around us. We read in newspapers, we hear this in media. Also, the asset quality risk on the financials, banking as well as the NBFC, which is currently masked by EMI moratorium, which has been provided by them. And also sharp decline in GDP number, which came last quarter. As well as there are talk about very sharp, likely sharp decline in the corporate earnings, etc., etc., etc. So these are the negative things I just mentioned. But there are also several positive high-frequency data or media reports or the new newses which are also coming. For example, I will just enumerate a few of them. For the September month, electricity consumption demand grew by almost 5%, as against 10% decline in last month, that is August 2020. We have been reading in the media that tire manufacturing companies are giving very good, talking very positive. Like CEAT is talking about that they are having the 100% capacity utilization. Similarly, Apollo Tires was talking about 80% plus. GST collection also in September, we saw almost 95,500 crores of collection, which is highest in last 7 months. And even if you see YOY, it was almost 4% growth. PMI data is also kind of coming positive. If you see July PMI data, which came 52 as against 46, 52 in August as against 46 in July. So first time, in recent months, we have crossed 50, which indicates there is a growth. On services, still we are below 50, but number has seen improvement from 34 in July 20 to 42 in August 20. And there are a host of other numbers like auto sales numbers or e-way bill generation, rainfall, unemployment data as per the CMI data, which saw improvement from 6.4% as on 20th September to 5.8%. This is reported by the CMI. So there are a lot of positive numbers have also come out, and therefore I would say that there are bouts of positive and negative data points, media reports, and as an investor, many of us are really confused. Is these positive numbers or earning revival next year are already in the price, or there is some more scope for the index or for the stocks to move up? So without taking much of your time, we would like to in fact hear the expert view on this, and therefore over to you, Atul. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Saday, and thank you, Dream Ladder team, for this opportunity to DSP Investment Managers, and also welcome all the clients of Dream Ladder. Very good evening to all of you. So Saday has already outlined the sort of the way in which this I will talk about. So starting with the market, I think Saday has mentioned a lot of things which are there happening in the global economy. So basically, I mean, we all of us know that COVID has caused a lot of disruption, and there are elections are going to happen. There are tensions around US, China, as well as rest of the world and China relationship, etc., etc. Also, as he has mentioned, in India also, we know the job losses, income losses, those things are happening. But I think one one of the biggest thing which has happened during this COVID crisis is the amount of liquidity pumped into the system by US Federal Reserves, as well as rest of the central banks like European Central Bank, as well as Japanese Central Bank. Also, these governments have gone on overdrive to support the economies. So many of you would be aware that the US government has given like $600 per week of allowance to unemployed people for almost 3 to 4 months, and now they are talking about extending that. So there are estimates or guess that almost 10 to 12 trillion dollar has been pumped into global financial system in last 6 months, starting March or April. This is a huge liquidity, and this is on top of what has been infused since 2008 Lehman crisis. So I mean, all of us aware that the financial system was has become very fragile post the Lehman crisis. We have heard in 2013-14 that Greece or Portugal were up to almost went up to bankruptcy, but again central banks infused so much money and helped them survive. So I think there is huge liquidity into the financial system, and in last 6 months we have sort of gone on an overdrive. So there are two effects of this liquidity. First, it has sort of restricted the further damage which could have happened. I mean, because of such a big crisis, there was a complete demand loss for 1 or 2 months, and it could have happened that one or two big financial institution or one or two big company would have gone bankrupt, and that could have started a contagion effect. But because of this kind of effort or support from the central banks and the government, I think that kind of uh, further financial crisis has been averted. So I think that is the first order of effect of this liquidity, that it could have become actually very bad, but because of this liquidity, those kind of further loss has been avoided. And the second effect of this liquidity is basically the recovery which we have seen in the markets. So I mean, there are as Saday mentioned, there is a lot of disconnect between, or divergence between, what is happening on ground and what is happening in the market or the share market globally as well as in India. So I think that is to a large extent is a result of this liquidity. Obviously, from the lows of no business in April, many companies or many sectors have come back to 80-100% utilization level. The oil sale or the petrol or diesel sales in India has recovered to 100% level. So that means the economic activity has rebounded, and that is also a reason for market to rejoice. But I think large part of this market coming back globally is basically this liquidity. And I think Indian market will also, I mean, for many years now, and particularly in last 3-6 months, they are following the global markets, and the trend will continue. We will continue to follow how the markets are doing in US, particularly the Dow and the Nasdaq, etc. So to that extent, I think liquidity is going to play a big role, at least for a foreseeable future. This liquidity has been injected in last 6 months, but taking it out will take a long period of time, because whenever Fed has tried to take out this liquidity from the financial system, market have become very jittery, and the Fed has to go back or the sort of reverse the decision of sucking out the liquidity. So it's going to be there. And I think last 10 to 12 years, the developed marketers are waiting for a growth rebound and inflation to come back, because for any economy, a moderate level of inflation is also very essential to grow and come out of the debt crisis. Because when the growth is there and the inflation is there, the nominal revenues goes up, and when the nominal revenues goes up, the government tax collections goes up. So I think those developed markets were waiting for that, and I think globally the inflation is about to make a comeback. I do a lot of reading. That, I mean, this is not my sort of conclusion. Do a lot of reading, like, and the economists like Russell Napier and Chris Wood, they are mentioning that inflation should make a comeback over a period of 1 or 2 years because of this liquidity and the rebound which we are seeing. And the one thing is basically we have seen the rally in gold in last 1 year, 18 months, almost 70-80% rally in gold. I think that is some kind of a harbinger that the inflation globally is about to come, because gold do very well in two scenarios. One is inflation coming back, or something like geopolitical tensions like war, etc. I don't think gold has gone up because of geopolitical tensions or any of such thing. It is essentially is going up because of inflation expectations coming back, and also the cycle of 8-10 years of a has been over for gold. I mean, for every asset class there is a cycle of 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and gold has completed that. And I think the macroeconomic situation is forming such that I think we will see growth coming back over a period of time. Then inflation will also follow, and many asset prices will start going up. Basically, we have seen that real estate is also stagnated since 2011-12. The rates have not gone up, and the volumes were also very dry in last 5-6 years. But I think like gold, over a period of next maybe 12-18 months, we will see real estate also start contributing in the recovery. First, it will happen in terms of volume. You will see more and more real estate sale happening, and then the prices will follow. It is also a cycle. And I think the lowest interest rate which are there, like SBI, HDFC, are now giving loans at 6.70%. And it has caused the difference between rent and EMI to narrow. So in Bombay, you might see that in the 2 BHK is rent, the rentals are around say 40-45,000, and the EMI is now coming to almost 75-80,000. So the difference, which is now 40,000, it used to be 60-70,000 earlier. So whenever this difference narrows, the decision of people start tilting towards buying a home, because everybody understand that rent is an expense, but EMI is like a SIP you do in a mutual fund. With that EMI, you basically build a asset which is called home. So I think that will also start happening. And whenever the real estate cycle starts, it is good for the entire economy. Because I mean, 50 kind of subsectors depend on real estate, like tiles, electrical wires, fans, ACs, everything. And then real estate is also one of the biggest employment generator. So I think hopefully over a period of next 12-18 months, it will start. I'm not talking about the examples which always given, like lower Parel or the Delhi, some parts of Delhi, etc. Probably they will not recover, or they will take a very long time to recover. But the suburbs of the more metro cities, or the smaller towns, or the tier 2 towns, I think certainly, I think the prices or the volume should start happening. The real estate, as I mentioned, the prices have not gone anywhere. They have completed almost 8 years of consolidation. Incomes of people have gone up, maybe not to that extent, but certainly in last 8 years through promotions or skill development, the income of people who would have gone up to by 50-60%. And now the interest rates are very low. This kind of scenario was there, if you remember, in 2006-07, when the interest rates, housing mortgages rate went to almost 7%. So I think we are sort of entering that kind of scenario. So because of the net, I think the liquidity globally will help support the asset prices. They will help the asset prices sustain. I mean, we have seen that there is so much volatility in the market in last 15 days, but still market finds the support because there is so much liquidity sitting on the sidelines. And I think it will keep on supporting the asset prices, and probably they will go up also with the recovery building up. We have in India something called as liquid funds in mutual funds. So these are designed for parking the excess liquidity. Similarly, in US, there are money market funds where people park their liquid asset. And we have seen in 2000, 2007, 8, and now also we have seen in last 4 months, this money market fund AUM has ballooned to almost $4.5 trillion. The people have parked $2 trillion in this money market fund, almost at zero interest rates. And whenever the risk in the system comes down, this money again starts come back into earning assets or physical assets. Like earning asset is equity is earning asset because it is it has a underlying of the profits of the company and or the physical assets like gold and real estate. So I think as the situation normalizes, as the risk comes down with probable vaccine or medicine coming out in next 2-3 months, etc., and probably the risk of or whatever the perceived risk of US elections also goes out of the way from January, February, this money will keep on coming back into the this kind of assets. So I think we know the sort of one side of it, the maybe negative side of it, the COVID related disruption and job losses, income losses. But I think liquidity is one byproduct of it, and I think it is going to play a big role going forward into asset prices. So basically, this is in a way I explained in a circular way of economics that this will happen. But if in a very crude way, if I want to explain it, so anything which is in excess, it loses its value. And in last 6 months, money has been printed in such a big excess quantity that I think money will lose its value. And when I say money will lose its value, means that other asset classes will go up in value. I mean, it's a relative thing that we call that equity has gone up or real estate price has gone up. But the other way of looking at it is basically money has lost its value. पैसे का value गिर गया है. And I think that kind of situation will start happening now, and we will see prices going up, but actually it's basically money will lose its value. So that is I think a sort of big picture. Within this big picture, I think obviously a lot of volatility will be there, like Trump has tested corona positive, then he will face elections, and in India we have the case load going up and the debts are also going up. But I think uh, uh, at one point of time in April, we were sort of comparing this COVID crisis with Great Depression of 1929 or 30. But in last 3-6 months, we have seen such a sharp recovery. So I think this is kind of a big monetary experiment which has been going on since 2008-9, and liquidity is sort of one answer to is a way tool for this experiment. And I think because I'm trying to explain this in detail, because I get a lot of pushback when I say that liquidity will push the prices up. But I think we have to sort of align with this liquidity. We have to get adjusted to this liquidity, because it's going to stay here. Because as I said, whenever Fed had tried to pull it out, market become very jittery, and then the central banks or the policymakers actually had to take back their decision. So I think because of that, liquidity is going to stay here. And coming to India now, I think there are a lot of, I mean, again, negativity about this economy and all those things. I think, and I agree with all those things. There is a lot of damage happened to the Indian economy, because unlike the developed markets like US and Europe, who has given huge packages, stimuluses, we are not in a position to do those kind of things, because dollar is a kind of a safe currency. Even the pound or the European currency is these are very strong currencies, but Indian rupee is not that. We are still an emerging market. So had our government went very bombastic on stimulus, our rupee would have depreciated a lot. So I think government has to do a very fine balance or delicate balance. So hence stimulus amount was not big, but hopefully they will come out with some mini stimulus, and they are promising that, saying that economic advisor Mr. Sanjeev Sanyal hinted many times that giving out stimulus during a very tough time may go waste, because anyway people are not coming out of homes. So when there is some kind of control on COVID in terms of vaccine, medicines, etc., they will time the stimulus at that time, so it will have the maximum effect on the economy. So hopefully they will do that. But I will say that though government is not in a very good shape, RBI, the Reserve Bank of India, is in a very good shape in terms of the foreign reserves. From 1991, when we had to pledge our gold in Switzerland banks, right now we have $550 billion of forex reserves. Even RBI has a lot of other ammunition at their hand to support the economy, including interest rates. So I think that RBI will continue to do that. And I think, like some of the other emerging market had experiment recently, like Indonesia, I think RBI will also I think the situation will come that RBI will also help out government in terms of stimulus. So there is something called as debt monetization. So uh, uh, basically government push keeps the debt paper with RBI, and RBI gives funds to government, and government uses that fund in productive activities like infrastructure. So I think that crudely explain the debt monetization term. They have a lot of repercussion to that, but I think that kind of ammunition is there with RBI. Hopefully we see such things going forward. One sort of not so good thing about Indian policymakers that they don't take sometimes proactive measures. They take measures only when they push to a corner or push to a wall. Only then we have seen the measures coming out. So I think hopefully we will see those coming out in future. Uh, that is on the overall macro perspective. Talking about the Indian economy, I think consumption will help India coming tide over this crisis. Earlier, we have seen infrastructure did that job in 2003, 4, 5, 6, 7. But right now, I think consumption will help us coming out of that. Again, I get some kind of pushback when I say that consumption will help India, because there are so many sort of job losses, income losses happened around us, and then there is migration and reverse migration. Reverse migration and migration happening now. But if you look around, I think, and in any economy, you will observe that maybe top 1/3 of the people, 1/4 or 1/3 of the people, they are always good in terms of wealth or income. And I think large part of the consumption, 60-70% of the consumption is driven by this top 30% of the population. There is in income inequality, and that's why it happens. So I think this 30-40% of the population, they will come out when we have some kind of control over COVID, in terms of maybe herd immunity developing, or vaccine or medicine over next 3-6 months. I mean, I'm not an expert in this medical field, but that's what we keep on reading. So these people will help India. And also there is huge pent up demand. People have not been able to spend in last 3-6 months. I think that will help. And second half of India is always very good in terms of economic activities, because there are festivals punched up, as well as the year end helps in that push. uh, Fortunately, we had a good rainy season or monsoon this year, as well as last year were also good. So that rural part of India should help the economy. And though the metros and tier 1 cities were completely locked down, I think the tier 2, tier 3 cities to a large extent still were functioning. So there is not so much of job loss, and the reverse migration has helped those villages and small towns. So I think that part of economy will, that part of economy, as well as this top the rich people, of affluent people, mass affluent people, will help India through consumption revival. Exports are doing well. IT exports are doing well, and there are a lot of opportunities there in chemical exports or textile exports and machinery exports, because China, I mean, whole world is looking at China with suspicion, and that will help India. Obviously, it will also depend on the ease of doing business, on which India fares pretty badly still. So that is a big problem for India. But the big picture is that there is opportunity. Now it's up to us how we capture that. So export can help us. Infrastructure, I don't have any big hopes, because there is a complete demand destruction in last 6 months. So corporates or companies may not invest, and government is also not in a position, unless they do something like RBI helping government. So government also is not in a big position to sort of help the infrastructure or roll out big infrastructure projects. So I think consumption and then exports will help India tide over this situation over a period of next 12-18 months. And as I said, if the real estate picks up, I think that will be a big engine for economic recovery. Uh, so that is on the macro. In sectorally, you would have seen that a lot of defensive sectors have done very well since the COVID crisis have started. Defensive means where companies don't lose their earnings in a big way, like FMCG or pharma or IT. These sectors have done very well. They don't generally have debt on their balance sheet and they don't suffer such in a big way in terms of sales. So these sectors have done very well because of that, and these sectors have also got re-rated. And on the other hand, the economy facing sectors like banking and finance particularly has suffered a lot. Those stock prices are still down 20, 30, 40% from the peak pre-COVID level. So I think this is the sector I'm most bullish on, banking and finance. This sector is still below pre-COVID level, unlike other sectors which are like 50% up from the pre-COVID level. So there is a lot of value in these banking and finance companies. Obviously, there are a lot of concerns about banking and finance, that there will be NPA issues or the bad loan issues, and even Supreme Court is involved into this, etc., etc. But I think I'm not talking about the entire banking and finance. I'm not talking about the PSU space at all, because I don't invest into PSU banks. I only talking about some of the private banks like HDFC, Kotak, Axis, ICICI, etc., and some of the NBFCs like HDFC Limited and Bajaj Finance. I think with these top 7-8 names and insurance companies, I think these names will do very well over a period of next 12-18 months and beyond that also. Because I have a great comfort on their asset quality. We have seen their track record in terms of credit appraisals. They are very good in that. These people were cautious since demonetization itself in terms of whom to lend, because after demonetization people have understood the asset quality problems, and since then they were cautious. So hopefully the selection of borrowers is good for last 3 years, and 70% of these loans of these private banks, etc., I mentioned, they are given through cross selling of their customers. I mean, if somebody has a home loan, then only they have given a car loan, etc. Or if somebody has a saving account, then only they have been extended car loan or home loan. So they know the history of the customers, so they have done their work on that. Also, large part of the customers are basically government employees or top PSU, top corporate employees, etc., to the extent of 70-80%. So again, the risk goes down to that extent. And last big point is basically uh, people now understand the importance of CIBIL score. People understand that if the CIBIL score goes below 600, 650, they will face a lot of problems in terms of getting loans in future, or the interest rate may be higher for them. So people come up and pay their loans and settle the matter, because they don't want their CIBIL score to go down. CIBIL score has a lot of repercussion, because if somebody want to send his child abroad for a higher study, in those cases CIBIL score is required now. So I think the CIBIL score is acting as a big deterrent in terms of sort of defaulting on any loan. So hence I believe these companies will surprise positively in terms of the asset quality compared to the fears which market has. And the other thing is basically uh, this is the thing, actually last 10 years it is happening, and last 3-6 months it has become even more clear that there is completely two camps in this, in every sector, and particularly in banking and finance. These banks and NBFCs are very strong in terms of management, their brands like HDFC or Bajaj, and their distribution, and their capital position or the balance sheet strength. Uh, and compared to these guys, there is opposite in terms of PSU banks or some of the other NBFCs or banks, where their capital position is very, very, concerning or very challenging, and hence they will not be in a position to lend. So these private banks will take away a lot of market share. So even if the entire economy doesn't grow like 13-14%, these guys can surely grow much better than that by market share gains. So HDFC Bank CEO has already mentioned that he will double his market share in next 5 years. So basically in last 20 years, HDFC Bank has reached to a 10% market share in the overall banking system. And the CEO is saying that in next 5 years, he will take it to 20%. So it is a huge thing which is going to happen in terms of market share shift. And I think it is the same thing which is happening across sectors in India. Bigger and better companies are becoming very strong, and I think they are becoming bigger and better. Something in sectors like footwear, which is a small sector, I think companies like Bata and Relaxo, they are becoming very strong. They have become very strong, and they are becoming very efficient now, and they are taking market share from others, because there are so many changes which are happening all around in terms of, we have seen demonetization, and there are a lot of regulatory changes like GST and all. Uh, I mean, things are getting tightened with everywhere. Aadhaar, PAN, GST numbers are required. Technology is changing a lot, uh, and companies where the managements are not able to understand these changes, regulatory changes, the environmental changes, or technology changes, they are losing their positioning in the market. They are losing their market share. And contrary to that, companies which are having that momentum, they are actually adopting these changes and using those changes to their advantage, and they are actually gaining the market share. So I think it is happening across sectors, and I think that is the way I look at companies and select stocks. So first, completing the sectoral stance. So banking and finance is first. Second, insurance. I'm also very bullish. I think what has happened in the banking space, like these private banks were so small 15 years back, and they continuously kept on solidifying their position and increased their market share and came to this level now. I think next 5, 10, 15 years, we will see that happening. There is huge penetration opportunity for insurance. I'm sure a lot of us also don't have adequate health covers and policy covers. So that opportunity is there. The another big opportunity is basically the annuity kind of, or the pension policies, which will come into existence in future, because not even government employees which are joining off late, they are not going to get pension. So that big opportunity is there. And so product innovation will keep on happening. The managements are very good in this private insurance, and they will keep on taking market share from the PSU general insurance companies or even Life Insurance Corporation of India, because they are not able to keep up with the changes which are happening out there, like technology changes, digitally reaching customers, etc., etc. So that is one big sector. I think that will create big wealth for shareholders. Then I am positive on some of the pharma companies, though I have mentioned that the stocks have done very well. But fortunately, I was invested heavily into pharma companies before COVID, and these companies have done very well. So I booked profit in some of those positions and investing back into banking and finance, because pharma I have made money. So I cut down position in those, trim position, not fully cut down, and putting it in other sectors. So, but still I'm overweight in pharma, bullish on pharma with those 4-5 names which I have. Then I'm very bullish on some of the chemical companies like Aarti Limited, Atul Industries, etc. Basically, as I mentioned, there is this shift which is happening from anti-China thinking, and all companies like Bayer, Monsanto, all these global MNCs are basically looking for a second or alternate source, and India fits very well in with our chemistry skills and management capabilities. So I think these companies are doing very well, and I think next 5 years they will continue to reap the benefit because of this. So that is one big call I have taken. And the other thing is, I'm very confident or very comfortable with the managements of these companies actually. So the one thing to remember is that even if there is opportunity, we should have people who are able to capture that opportunity, so that we are getting in this industry or sector. Then I'm positive on cement sector. Basically, I think people talk about infrastructure and build up happening, etc., etc. But if you look at how infrastructure contracts are secured, how they are executed, and how the money is recovered, hardly any investor makes money out of this whole exercise. And also, real estate, as I mentioned, is a big opportunity. But making money out of real estate stock is also a very big task, because you know how the home building happens and the cash components and all those things. So, but actually cement is a better way to capture all these things, because real estate or infrastructure, cement will be required, and cement is a very clean way of benefiting out of it, because it's an organized sector. There is no cash component or anything like that. They sell on cash mostly. So their balance sheets are very clean, and they have got a pricing power. So I always play real estate and infrastructure through cement companies like Ultratech or Shree or Ramco kind of companies, very efficient companies, world-class companies. And I think that's why you will see very little of infra company in my portfolio or real estate company in my portfolio, but you will always find cement companies in my portfolio. Uh, and then I'm positive on telecom. Bharti, basically, there's one position. Last 10 years, I didn't have any telecom exposure, but the sector has gone through a complete consolidation now. So many companies went out of business, and now there are only just 4 companies. Within that, also, the position of BSNL and Vodafone Idea. So basically, there is Jio and then there is Bharti. So I think because of it now, you will see or you will observe that the tariffs which we are paying for telecom services or the mobiles, we will continue to go up now, because these companies are in a very dire position. They have huge debt on their balance sheets, and I think this is a good turnaround which is going to happen. But it's not a core position like HDFC Bank or cement companies, because generally I tend to avoid companies which are where government intervention is very uh, I mean government intervention is very high, or the capex requirements are very high. So I generally avoid such sectors or companies. So I try to play them in a tactical way. So I bought it at a good price, and I will trim it or exit it at a price. I will not continuously stay invested for long in this kind of companies. So these are some of my overweight sector. In terms of neutral, as I mentioned, consumption is a good opportunity, and I will stay invested into consumer companies like Britannia, Asian Paint, DMart, etc. Then there are a whole host of other companies like Voltas, Havels, etc. So basically, all in these consumption companies, they have very good brands like Relaxo, Havels, Voltas, Asian Paint, etc. They have very good managements. You don't have to worry about corporate governance for these companies, and they are offering consistent growth for last 20 years, and I think they will continue to do that over next 10, 20 years also. So that is the way I look at these companies. In terms of underweight, I have I have zero exposure into metal company. I don't have any metal stock. I have zero exposure to power utility company. I just have one tactical name like Tata Power, again like Bharti, but that is also a tactical exposure. Otherwise, I don't invest into power companies. I have very little exposure to oil and gas companies sector also. Again, I don't like government intervention. I don't like very high capital expenditure oriented companies, or I don't like cyclical companies. So hence I keep very little weight into these kind of companies. So that is the overall portfolio as of now, or sectoral outlook. I just want to touch upon my investment style, because there are a lot of investment styles, like how to choose or how to select stocks, basically stock selection. Uh, so people very well-known investment style is, one is basically buying very cheap companies or value investing, but that is not my style. I like to invest into companies where I have a full confidence about the business model, that is very strong, that brand is there, distribution is there, the business is continuously making money, generating cash. The management has to be very good in terms of capability as well as honesty, and then there should be growth. So if I get these kind of things in a company, and you can observe those things in banks like HDFC Bank or Kotak Bank or Asian Paint or Bajaj Finance, then I don't worry so much about valuation. I buy them expensive also, uh, because these things over a period of time justify this expensive valuation and still make money for the investors. While you look at some of the value stock, basically you assume lot of risk in terms of business or management. Basically these stocks are cheap because there is some kind of risk in those businesses, like government intervention or like management corporate governance is not up to the mark, and in many such cases basically that investment doesn't pan out. In you one might make money out 2 out of 10 cases in such instances, but in 8 cases you tend to lose your investment value. in such cases. So I think that is value investing or cheap kind of stocks. It is more risky, and I would say that I am sort of willing to assume the risk of buying expensive companies, but I don't want any risk of a mediocre business model or a mediocre or a sort of management where I have doubts about the corporate governance of that management. It doesn't pan out. So I think that is the investment approach I have. It has, I think, played out very well till now, and I think it will continue to do very well. Investors have become very discerning. They are learning from their past mistakes and becoming more discerning. There is a big wave of ESG investing globally, environment, safety, and governance. And large funds like the sovereign funds, etc., they are mandating their managers that don't invest into polluting companies or companies where the governance or the management is not up to the mark, or uh, safety norms are compromised. So people are shunning investment into power companies which are burning coal, or they are shunning investment to tobacco companies or alcohol companies, or not putting investment to oil exploration companies, etc., etc., where sort of they are not sort of investing into pollution control, etc. So I think that is also playing a big role in this kind of investments, and that's why you are seeing that some companies have become very expensive, but I think they will continue to remain expensive. So this is one angle. Second angle is obviously liquidity is there. That's why this expensiveness is there to see. Interest rates are very low. Obviously, when interest rates are very low, valuation will look expensive, or they will remain supported at those kind of levels. So I think every over a long period of time, the way to approach investments is changing in terms of valuations. So these are the new dimensions to valuations which are coming up in last 20 years with this ESG, liquidity, lower interest rates which are happening. These three things are big drivers of this kind of uh, valuation divergence which we are seeing into the market. Uh, and I don't think this trend reversing anytime soon. I think that I have spoken a lot. So I think I will stop here. And Sadai, if you have any questions, or if any of the participants have any questions, I'll be happy to take those questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Atul. Yeah, it was wonderful. You touched upon entire thing. So, in fact, you have preempted my many questions, right? So,
Okay.
obviously, our participants, you have the opportunity to ask questions directly with the guy who is managing the money, right? So that is the advantage you have. So you can either post a question in the chat box, or you can raise your hand. There is a functionality there, I'm sure, and then we can take questions, right? So, Atul, in the meantime, people will prepare and they will come forward to ask these questions. I will maybe you have touched upon different sectors, right? So, I have a question on the auto sector. So, how you are reading this monthly auto sales number which came for the September? Maruti reported almost 34% growth. Hyundai, Hero Motors, everyone reported good numbers. Even M&M reported good numbers for tractors. So
Yeah.
obviously you have a rural versus urban play. So you can talk about this in detail, and slightly what we understand that this is a kind of a sale to a dealer, right? So if Maruti
Yes.
is selling to a dealer in expectation that a strong festival demand can absorb this kind of supply to the dealer. So what is your
Yeah.
opinion that registration numbers which are from the RTO? I'm sure you must be looking at that data also. So how
Yeah.
that is panning out?
Yeah. So basically, this has to a large extent has become a game of expectations versus the reality. Now the reality was so bad 3 months back or 4 months back, and now compared to that, these numbers are looking very good. But actually, if you look at the retail sales or the Vahan data registration, which the RTO has gone online in last 2 years, and you can find the retail sales, that has also picked up from the very low levels of June, July, but it's not still not YOY trend is not still good on the retail side. So you are and you are, as you mentioned rightly, that these numbers are from basically deliveries from the automakers to the dealers. These are wholesale numbers. These are not retail numbers in anticipation of the festive season, which is approaching now. So the key will be to see how the retail sales pick up over period of next 2 months. Basically, Dashera, Diwali, and even the Adhik Mas is going on now. Typically, sales is good in Adhik Mas. So it is in anticipation of that, as well as the lost sales of last 4 or 5 months. So companies as well as dealers are expecting that there has to be some pent up demand. Festive season is also approaching, and the third angle is people are uh, people are hoping that dealers or the automakers are hoping that people will use their own vehicle rather than using buses or trains to for commuting, because there is a obviously still going to be a fear of COVID for next 6 months, 12 months. So people might use their personal vehicle rather than the public transport, and that will give some support to the demand. So these are all expectations of these dealers and automakers, and that's why the wholesale numbers are looking very good. These are basically inventory filling which is happening for the dealers to the extent of 4 weeks of sales or 6 weeks of sales, but we will see how the sales will pick up. One good thing which will help this year is basically the interest rates. So you would have seen advertisements of from State Bank of India, etc. The auto loans are available at 8% or even 7.5%, etc. So this very low interest rate can help revive demand, and along with the other three factors which I've mentioned. But real test will be we will come to know after Diwali how the retail sales has happened. Other thing is that auto sector is always very cyclical. There are very 2-3 good cycle 2 years, and then 2-3 bad years. So we have seen 2015, 16, 17 very good years for auto. Maruti launched Brezza, Baleno, and two Ertiga, etc. So did very well. Similarly, RE, the Eicher Motors launched or revamped their models, so they did very well. So those 2-3 years, and the economy was also doing very well. So those 3 years were very well. Then demonetization, sorry, demonetization sort of derailed the economy to some extent, and the auto volume growth also plummeted. Is that it was just a trigger point, I would say, not derail, but it was a trigger point. So this cycle went into a sort of reverse gear. Now people were expecting that from 2021 the cycle will revive, but then the COVID hit us. So it's a combined play of bouncing back from that bottom, and also the auto cycle revival. So both these factors are sort of panning out, and it is not yet clear how it will play out. Along with that, I think at the stock level, the competition, as everybody is aware, is sort of hitting up a lot. Like in four-wheelers or the passenger cars, uh, Kia has ramped up very well in last 2 years. Earlier, there was virtually no competition to Maruti in terms of affordable cars, but now Kia has come out with Sonet and all. Hyundai is also coming out, as well as people are sort of moving to SUVs, where Maruti has very limited offerings. So, uh, I mean, people like fund managers like us has to look at that aspect also. Even if there is recovery, how much Maruti will gain out of it, and how much they will lose to Kia and Hyundai, because whenever there is such sort of events or cycle change, many times the leaders sometimes solidify their position, or they lose out in a big time. So we have to look at, and the same thing is happening in the premium motorcycles. Like Royal Enfield has gained so much, but now Honda has come out with a Highness bike, a 350cc bike at 1,90,000, neck to neck with Royal Enfield. Similarly, Mahindra and Mahindra has come out with Java. It has not picked up, but competition is coming up in every for every OEM or the automaker. So probably from that angle, I am thinking that it will be a better idea to play auto or the auto cycle or the coming auto cycle through auto ancillaries. because they supply to all these automakers. So I think from that angle, I would say that first we have to watch the festive season, and even then, if you want to invest, I would say I would invest through auto ancillary companies than direct auto companies, because they are probably going to face a lot of competition.
Okay. Okay. Mr. JP Sinha, can you? I think there's this. He has a question. So please.
Yes, yes. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you, sir.
Okay. So Atul, it was a brilliant presentation. Let me tell you, summarizing everything very brilliantly. I have a very quick question because of this entire saga of multi-cap thing which is happening,
Yeah.
right? Where the SEBI has come out with regulation now forcing you to do and given some alternatives. How do you think this is going to play? Right? Because see, each fund, if you look at each fund has one or two flagship funds, and multi-cap is in some cases, or rather in many cases, is one of those flagship funds.
Yeah.
Now, how as a fund house you guys are playing out, and how do investors should take this? Because there's a lot of jitteriness into the investors also.
Yeah. Correct, correct. So a very pertinent question related to the current market, because last 1 month, I mean, we have been dealing with this ever since the SEBI circular came in. So I mean, and it actually came like out of a blue. I mean, there were no consultations or any sort of draft or I mean news about that. So I will answer this at two levels. First, at the industry level, I think every AMC has a one multi-cap fund, and that is actually the flagship or diversified scheme, as you mentioned. So I think many of these very big funds, multi-cap funds, they will probably sort of convert the schemes into different category, and we are hearing that obviously in the industry through the body AMFI association has represented SEBI and explained them in very great details that it is not sort of to some extent practical for the bigger funds to have 25% small cap. So probably there is a there are high chances that SEBI will come out with the flexi cap category, and this lot of multi cap funds can shift to that flexi cap category and continue managing the way they are managing right now. So there will be just category change for many of the AMCs. Some of the, and if this SEBI doesn't come out with this kind of flexi cap category, some of the AMCs can probably merge the scheme into some of their large cap category funds or large and mid cap category funds. Because of that, the numbers were doing round that mutual fund managers has to buy so many per crores of small cap, etc. I think the numbers will not be anywhere close to that, those numbers like 30,000, 40,000 crore of buying in mid cap, small cap. The real numbers are not going to be anywhere close to that. So that is at the industry level. I think in our case, I myself manage the multi-caps fund of DSP, which is the first fund DSP launched, and it is a flagship for us. It is almost like 3,500, 3,600 crore for us. So my thinking is that basically, as I mentioned, I will look at companies as whether it fits into my investment approach or not. Uh, whether the business is good, whether the management is good, and is it going to offer me growth for next 3, 5, 10 years. So if it is a large cap company or a small cap company, it doesn't matter so much to me. I missed mentioning this point earlier in my remarks, but I have mentioned in all my investment interaction for last 7, 8 years that a company is a good company or a bad company for me to start thinking about it. uh, the large cap, mid cap valuation, all these things come much later into my investment process. First it has to be a good company or a bad company, and then I will look at whether it's a, I mean, it doesn't matter actually to that extent whether it is a large cap or a small cap or a mid cap. If it fits into this, I will go and buy it. I mean, if you look at my portfolio currently also, I have some of the small cap to the extent of 7-8%, like VMart, etc. where I have great confidence of the management and the business model. So hence I am sitting on that those kind of companies for many years now. Even I have almost 24-25% mid cap, uh, because I believe that is because of stock selection and not because I have to have certain mid cap or certain small cap. Now probably I have to, if our AMC decides to continue with the multi cap, I don't think I will have any challenge in finding out 20-30 small cap or mid cap companies to invest. Till now I have not done that, because if I'm expecting say 30% upside from Bajaj Finance over a period of next 12-18 months, and I'm expecting 30% upside from say Canfin Homes, which are sort of equally good companies. I mean, Bajaj in its own league itself, but Canfin is also not that bad. uh, so if I'm expecting 30% upside from both these companies, naturally I will go for Bajaj Finance, because buying it and selling it is very easy for me, because in Canfin I have to look for the volumes and all those things. But as an investment or a stock level, it doesn't make any difference to me, because the businesses are good, managements are good, they are offering 15, 20, 25% growth potential over next 3-5 years. uh, so that is my answer actually. If at all it is required, it doesn't matter to me if I have to buy additional small cap or small cap. Basically mid cap, I don't have any problem. So I think, and this kind of confusion, or sort of not confusion, but actually it is a streamlining of funds, because before uh, SEBI did categorization of funds 2-3 years back, when there were in one category mutual fund used to some mutual fund used to have 2-3 funds, so there was a lot of confusion amongst distributor investors also. Then SEBI said in one category you can have only one fund. So actually SEBI did a good job in terms of streamlining the so that it becomes very clear uh, to the investors and the distribution community. This time also I think what SEBI is saying, that be true to your level of the fund. If you are calling yourself multi-cap, then may ensure that there are adequate sort of representation to each category of market, each category of market, like small cap or mid cap or large cap. So I don't think SEBI is I mean completely wrong in what the approach they have taken. uh, it will be a problem for some of the very big funds, like 15-20,000 crore funds, because for them it's very difficult or virtually impossible to buy small caps to that extent. And they have almost 85-90% invested into large caps. So for them it is going to be a problem. But I think SEBI will most probably will come out with this flexi cap concept, flexi cap category, and then they can migrate to that category. And uh, remaining of the mid-sized players, they can decide for themselves whether to remain in multi-cap or convert themselves into flexi-cap. So in our case, we have not taken any decision till SEBI comes out with any such clarification. And once SEBI comes out, we will look at the whole picture and take the decision which is in sort of best interest of unit holders.
Okay. So do you have any further question?
No, I think that was good. Thanks, Sadair. Thanks, Atul.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Atul, there is one more question in the chat box. I'm not sure whether you will be able to answer this talk specific. The gentleman is asking views on companies like L&T and Eicher Motors.
Uh, Actually, stock specific talking is very difficult for mutual fund managers, because there are so many regulations from the SEBI. But as I mentioned while talking about the auto sector, that the competition is coming into each and every category of I mean car or bike. So to that extent, we have to keep on checking that, especially when the expectations and the valuations are high. So that is one. And secondly, I also mentioned when I spoke about the cement sector, that it is always good to have or to play infrastructure through cement than the infrastructure companies or the construction companies. So I think that's my answer to the both the stocks which were answered question.
Okay. I think so. Sumit has a question, but that is a more Sumit. We will take it offline. That is not a no. He will not be able to answer. No. He's asking about some treatment of the loss on trading. Atul, I have a question. I'll play devil's advocate. You are saying you have a zero exposure to metals, right? So I just
Yeah.
just trying to throw some data points. Major steel mills recently, I was reading somewhere that they have increased the prices of HRC and CRC for from 1st October onwards, and in fact, the street was expecting that September prices will be rolled over, or maybe some decline, because the import prices have come down by almost 12-15 dollars per ton. So
Yeah.
and even other like NMDC also reported September sales number, which we saw almost 10% kind of a growth YOY and 17-18% monthly sequential increase. So why not metals? Like, is it because it's cyclical? You have to time, like entry and exit is, should be superb. Then only will make money, or some other reason.
Yeah, again, at two levels, I will answer. One level is basically what you have mentioned, that it's too much volatile. I mean, actually, steel prices started going up from July, August, and they were up for, I mean, at those levels for last 1 month. And now the data which is coming out from China is basically already the steel inventory in China has gone up a lot, and the prices have already started to decline. So it is very difficult to time the steel prices and hence the prices of the stocks of this and I will go to now metals, the metal prices. A lot of these metal prices are basically, I mean, 80% dependent on what's happening in China and what China is doing, whether they are stocking up, what are the stock levels. Uh, um, so it is, and we basically come to know after things have happened. So though, I mean, we are fund managers and we have analyst team and whatever, but I think it's very difficult to predict the prices. We are aware of these prices, what has happened in hindsight. So it's very difficult to do that. And secondly, there are so many variables for these metal prices. And secondly, even if I want to track these companies and invest in these stocks, I think in India, I mean, for me at least, the investment universe is just limited to two metal companies: one steel company, one for a very, I mean, the most reputed group, and the one aluminum company, again from a very old group or the very reputed group. Apart from these two companies, I just can't think of investing into any other metal companies because of the corporate governance problem. I mean, I can't trust them, and anyway they have very huge debt issues on their balance sheet. I mean, all these companies are heavily leveraged, and as I mentioned, repeatedly government intervention keep on happening in these companies in terms of mining leases, mining lease cancellations. Even they can go back and dig out some 2005-6 case, etc., etc. So uh, and whenever good times comes for these companies go and do some acquisition, a big acquisition, which obviously then when the cycle turns for bad, they got stuck with such big acquisitions. So I think uh, there are, as I mentioned, there are just two companies, and even if I decide to invest, I can invest maximum 2 3 4% into these metal companies, because otherwise if I invest 10%, it will invite a lot of volatility for my entire portfolio. So I just don't want to do that. And I mean, it will be too much of a headache for 2 3% to do that thing. So I can actually track finance sectors like lenders or consumer sectors, and actually get out or dig out a much better investment opportunities which can be structural in nature for 3 4 years. So that's my personal way of looking at this sector. I
Any
mean, basically, uh, overall, sorry, I just want to extend this further. I just want to generally go out with a elimination way. am happy actually to eliminate as many companies as possible on this business and the corporate governance angle. And when the universe shrink to whatever 200 to 50 companies, out of that, then I keep on selecting 50, 60, 70 companies for my portfolio. But actually, I think elimination does wonders to the portfolio returns rather than stock selection, I would say.
Mhm. true. Okay. Any question from the participants? Otherwise, I have to chip in some questions. If you have any questions, you can either there is a option there. You can go and raise hands, and then or you can write chat. You can write in the chat box. Atul, I'll ask one question on IT sector. How do you see IT sector performing in coming quarters? Obviously, now the results will start pouring in, and what we understand that IT companies will have a multiple tailwinds. Like revenue is likely to boosted by ramp up in deals. Also on the resolution of supply side issues. People are companies have completely started operating from the work from home, and in fact also in terms of sentiments, Indian IT companies have got a tremendous kind of a image makeover in terms of we can manage these kind of uncertainties. So that has happened, and obviously accelerated digitization. Also in terms of cross currency advantage, maybe for for the audience, I just want to explain this, that euro has kind of a has moved almost 6% vis-a-vis dollars. Similarly, like pound or Australian dollars. So all these will help in the margin. So what do you say, that the recent movement in the prices are already factoring these positive things, or still one should keep good IT companies in the portfolio? And is there any divergence between the large and mid cap IT companies which one should play on?
Yeah. So first of all, I mean, I have to admit that I went wrong in assessing the IT company's potential. I mentioned my investment framework, that business management and growth, BMG, and the last G was missing in IT companies pre-COVID. Basically, these companies used to grow at 15, 20, 25% in the, say, 2010, 12, etc. But then the growth rate, because of their size also, and what are the globally happening, has plummeted to almost 6, 7, 8%. I mean, IT companies are struggling. We are struggling to even grow at 5, 6% as recently as Jan Feb. But during COVID, first of all, they managed this transition from work from home very efficiently and very quickly. So that has helped them a lot, and they got the client confidence because of that. And secondly, what has happened because of this COVID crisis globally is this importance of online has come to a fore significantly. It has acted like a trigger point or inflection point, and lot of companies, sort of a retailing company like maybe Walmart, and I mean, just giving examples, all these companies have sort of upfronted their online investment or whatever IT investment which they were supposed to do from, say, 22, 23, 24. They are saying that their CEOs are saying that do it in just next 1 year or 18 months. So a lot of work is sort of getting upfronted, and that is helping these IT companies getting, and that's why their commentary has turned so bullish in last 1-2 months. uh, and that was completely unanticipated from the market forces. Basically, market, we were we had a lemon experience 2007-8, and that time IT companies suffered a lot because client just canceled the spends, they just canceled the projects. They asked for heavy discounts from these IT companies because they were facing headwinds in their businesses. But this time it was completely reverse. Clients basically expanded their spend budgets. They have preponed the upfronted the projects, etc., and they are not asking for any basically pricing cuts, etc. So these has helped these IT companies. And on the other hand, the domestic economy like banking or this auto and etc., they are facing a lot of headwinds because of the job loss, income loss, and those kind of scenarios. So IT stocks have done very well, but it's not that their 6% or 7% growth trajectory is going to 14 or 15. From 6, 7, they're shifting to maybe 9, 12% or 9, 10% growth trajectory. So it's not a doubling of growth trajectory. And this 9, 10 will also probably go on for maybe next 12, 18 months. Then again, it will shift down to 6, 8%, depending on companies. So I think that is one. Secondly, the companies got re-rated massively, like companies which were trading at say 20p now trading at 28p, or companies which were trading at 12 13p now trading at 20p. So a lot of that also has panned out because of the defensive nature of the companies, and people just went after buying those companies. So I think large part of that share price movement has played out. There is some still juice left, because I think there will be positive surprises from the next quarterly results, or even after that. uh, on margins also, these companies can surprise positively, because work from home is helping them cut their opex, operating expenditure as well as capital expenditure, because uh, uh, if that trend continues even to the extent of 30-40% of employees, I think their expenditure on having so big campuses will go down, so they will save there. Also, a, a very uh, different point is emerging, that the women participation in IT labor force can go up, basically because uh, at from campuses a lot of women join IT companies, but because of the compulsions etc., or duties etc., lot of these women actually drop out of, I mean, sort of leave the field or the job. But with work from home coming in, I think more women can continue with their job, or actually women who have left the field, they can join back, because they can manage the work as well as home much better way. So, and when women come into the field, I think the attrition, which is the big worry for these IT companies, they can manage in a much better way, because the job hopping is not to is much lesser for women employees than the male employees. So I think that will also a trend which is emerged, I think, going forward. But the other point for IT sector as well as pharma companies is basically they have done so well because of the there were not many alternatives, there was so much liquidity, and these sectors were doing well. But if the definitive answer to this COVID comes in terms of vaccine, or a medicine, or a herd immunity etc., I think market will en masse shift to, or try to en masse shift to, cyclical sectors like auto or banks, or I mean the economy like sectors, or hotels or multiplexes, or those kind of sectors, because they are still very attractively valued. And you will see the recovery, the next leg of recovery in those sectors. Like we have seen the recovery in IT pharma in last 6 months because of COVID. Now we will see the recovery in those cyclical sector because of control over COVID. So money will try to go there. So I think IT will hold there, probably will do maybe last 10, 15, 20%. But if as and when we get this vaccine and medicine, I think the cyclical sectors will do very well going forward.
Okay, Atul, I think we will close. Just there are two questions. I know we have crossed that 1 hour. There are two questions in the chat box. What is your view on cloud and platform companies? Will the 100p valuation sustainable?
So I think these cloud and platform companies are growing very fast, like almost to the extent of 40-50% in some cases. But uh, technology is always prone to disruption. uh, we have seen examples of Nokias and Blackberries and all, and even in basically I don't have a technology field, IT field. I'm a chartered accountant, so I don't have that much knowledge, but I have tracked IT and invested into IT company for long. So basic thing is these companies are prone to disruption. uh, so if something new technology comes, or the compression technology comes in, the requirement of this cloud or platforms, not platform but cloud, can go down etc. So that can happen. And also one thing about percentage is basically the base. The base itself become a big hindrance in terms of managing this 100% kind of, or the 50% kind of growth rate. As I mentioned, IT companies were struggling to grow at 6%. That is purely because of their base. I mean, TCS was growing at 15-20% when they were $8 to $10 billion revenue. But now when they have crossed $22 billion of revenue, having that 15% growth is impossible. Actually, in absolute term, they are adding the same amount of revenue every year. They were adding, say, $2 billion in 2011-12. Now also they are actually adding $2-3 billion every year. But in percentage term, it's looking very low because of the base. So I think it will also happen in terms of this cloud and platform companies. When they become like $50 billion, obviously the $10 billion will look 20%. And when they become $80 billion, that $10 billion addition will look just like 12%. And we in the market look at the percentage growth or the PEG ratio, what we call P upon the growth rate. That should be around 1 or 2, somewhere between that. Obviously, the P compression will happen. They cannot keep on trading at 100 P. So it can happen in it can happen in two ways. One, the price can correct itself. If a company is trading at say 100 rupees and the profit is 1, that is 100 P, so the price can become 50 and the P become 50. Or the price, the second most likely chance is the price will remain 100, but the profit will grow from 1 to 2 to 3, and hence the P will come down to 50 to 30 or 20, etc. So one first is basically we call it price correction in the market, that price itself correct and the P correct. Second, we call it time correction, that the price remains at the same stage but the earnings keeps on growing, because we have factored in that earning growth current right now, because there are so many lakhs of thousands of smart investors in the market and try to discount the future in the current prices. And when that happens, typically time correction happens, so the stock will remain at 100 rupees for next 3 years, and but the earnings will keep on rising, and at some point of time it will again become attractive in terms of P, and then again the stock price can move up. So I think to my mind, uh, they will the P will come down, but not because price correction, but it will happen because of the time correction.
Okay. Last
Yeah.
question. If you can try again, there is a company specific question. So I'm not sure whether you will be able to attempt this. Tata Consumer. Sector.
Yeah. So again, on the stock level, difficult to comment, but we can just look at Tata Group as a whole, or one particular jewelry company, Titan or Tanish. So if you look at this company or look at their history, they have actually found out a completely sort of unorganized space, like even watches or jewelry. They were mom and pop people were sort of used to import watches or make jewelry and sell, but they made out brands out of these unorganized sectors. They made them organized. They put up their manufacturing. Jewelry is a very manufacturing oriented, because they need to have karigars and all those things, so they have put up that entire ecosystem. So I think the group has a lot of patience in terms of staying invested in a new category and developing that entire ecosystem. We have seen that example in the company, other company in that group. I think the company you have asked is trying to do the same thing in other unorganized categories like dal and masalas and all those things. It is completely unorganized sector, and they are regional brands or people make those things at home, etc. But as we progress forward or become developed, I think with continuously, their quality is obviously good. They will invest behind the brand and distribution, and obviously people will keep on shifting to better products and etc. So I think over a period, I think that company will again become like a Titan kind of company, where completely, and Titan is trying to do that with saris now also, or other areas now, where it is completely unorganized, but they're trying to make a brand out of it. So it can also happen with this company, but it is going to be a journey of 5, 10, 15 years. But again, as the previous question was there, 100p cloud company or platform company, people have tried to discount that 5, 10-year future in this case also. We have to track the journey and then look at investing. So I think that is my sort of take on this company now. Obviously, because being a Tata Group, they will succeed, but the time can vary. 5 years can become 7 years or 10 years also, because these are very difficult categories. Because they are into teas also. I think in last 1 or 2 months, the tea prices has gone up by 40%. So whether people will stick to their brand or they will go to the loose tea again, that is we have to see that. And this customer behavior changes over a period of 5-10 years. It doesn't change in 2-3 months. So I think we have to keep all these things in mind, but obviously they're in a very good hands and group. Tata brand itself make half the work, because I have worked in Tata for 10 years. So that name itself does half the work. I think it's a good company. Only thing we have to check about look at the price or the valuations.
Okay. So thank you so much, Atul. It was wonderful presentation and very insightful, and we enjoyed, learned so many things. Even I also learned so many things. So thank you so much from the Dream Ladder, and also thank you to the Nikhil for organizing this, arranging this webinar with Atul. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, Saday, and thanks everybody for attending this webinar. Have a good weekend.